You sit down with $300 at a 2-5 game. The guy to your left has $1,800 in front of him. The guy to your right has $2,400 in front of him. You are the shortest stack at the table, and every player there knows it. They know they can put you to a decision for your entire stack on any street, and they know you cannot apply the same pressure back. So they will use that against you, whether they do it consciously or not. This is Vinton Poker, precision in, profits out. And today we're talking about stack depth, what it actually costs you when you ignore it, and why the same hand plays completely differently depending on one number and one number only. That number is effective stack, which is always the shortest of all stacks in any given hand. Let's say you have $2,000 and the villain has $300. So that hand is going to be played as a $300 hand. His stack sets the ceiling. So before you ever look at your whole cards, look at the stacks. That single habit will change every decision you make at the table in every hand. The problem is that most players sit down, post their blinds, and immediately look at their cards. Stack depth never enters their mind. They play ace-king the same way at 25 big blinds as they play it at 200 big blinds. They call with suited connectors at 30 big blinds because it works at 100 big blinds, and they never stop to ask why. They stack off with top pair in spots where the depth of the money should have told them to slow down 2 streets earlier. Stack depth is not a minor adjustment you make at the margins. It reshapes the entire game. When you're sitting between 20 to 40 big blinds, post-flop maneuverability shrinks dramatically and the game becomes far more driven by fold equity and raw showdown equity. Suited connectors lose value because the implied odds that make them profitable largely disappear at this depth. Small pairs lose value for the same reason. At 30 big blinds, calling a raise out of position with 7-6 suited against a tight range in a high rake live environment is a massive leak. And live rake specially punishes speculative pre-flops calling stations at shallow depth where your ability to realize your equity is already constrained. Set mining with pocket fives against a tight player is often just burning money. Big cards, on the other hand, go way up in value. Ace-jack off, king-queen suited, and ace-10 suited, for example, become weapons because they retain strong raw equity and realize it efficiently at shallow depth. Shallow stack poker primarily rewards simplicity, pressure, and raw equity. As stacks grow into that 40 to 80 big blind range, players assume that they have more room to maneuver, and that assumption is where a lot of live players bleed money quietly. That zone feels comfortable, but it punishes loose calling stations very, very hard. Here is what that depth actually looks like in practice. You open under the gun to $15 at a 2-5 game with king-queen suited at 60 big blinds. A solid player on the button 3-bets to $45. Flatting speculative or dominated hands in that spot becomes increasingly risky, and many situations shift towards more aggressive continuing strategies, either 4-betting or folding, rather than floating and hoping. At this depth, hands like ace-queen suited, pocket jacks, pocket tens, and king-queen suited are strong pressure hands precisely because you can use them to attack players who open wide and not continue without a premium. You raise more, call less, and stop giving action in spots where the math is working against you before the flop is even dealt. At 100 big blinds, you are in the normal live cash territory, and the game opens up considerably. You can set mine correctly, call suited connectors in position, flop flops, run multi-way bluffs, and apply real pressure to cap ranges. A common set mining heuristic at this depth is needing roughly about 15 times the call amount in effective stack against players who are likely to pay you off. If a villain opens to $15, you're calling with pocket fours. They need roughly $150 to $225 behind them, and they need to be the type of player who will stack off with overpairs or top pair top kicker. If they only have $80 behind them, that call is a lottery ticket with bad odds. You're not set mining at that point. You're just donating. Deep stacks at 150 big blinds and beyond represent a completely different game. And this is where amateurs torch entire sessions in a single hand. At 40 big blinds, one bad decision costs you 40 big blinds. Pretty simple. At 300 big blinds, one eagle call on the river can cost you your entire night. The scale of mistakes changes completely, and the players who do not account for that varying stack sizes pay for it in ways that they will never fully understand. Not potential explodes in value when the stacks are deep because implied odds become massive. Straights, flushes, sets, and nut flush draws all increase dramatically in value. 7-6 suited on the button against a loose cutoff opener at 300 big blinds often becomes a profitable call in most live game conditions. The same hand at 40 big blinds is a marginal garbage. Two identical cards, two completely different situations. What quietly destroys players at deep stack depth is reverse implied odds, a concept most live players have never seriously examined, and it costs them a fortune. Here's what it looks like in practice. You hold king jack off, and the flop comes king, 8, 5. Rainbow. Villain bets. You call. He barrels the turn large. You are now 250 big blinds deep with top pair weak kicker in a pot that is growing fast. You're genuinely lost and don't know where you stand. You call again. The river is a blank and he moves all in. Against a competent tight player who has been leading every street with conviction, stacking off here is a potential disaster. He tables ace-king, and you just lost your entire session with top pair. That's reverse implied odds, and it happens to players who do not adjust for depth every single time they put chips in the pot. Position at deep stack depth is an entirely different conversation from position at standard depth. At 100 big blinds, position matters. At 300 big blinds, position is a fucking weapon. Say you're on the button with 250 big blinds and the cutoff opens. You call with 8-7 of hearts. The flop comes jack 7-3 with 2 hearts. Villain bets, and you call with middle pair and a backdoor flush draw. The turn is an offsuit 4 and he checks. Against a passive live player pool, that check heavily weakens and often caps his range, making his holdings far easier to define than yours. He is uncomfortable and you have every advantage. The river is a 6, completing a possible straight. He checks again, and you overbet, and he folds. You win a meaningful pot with a hand that had modest showdown value at best, because you had position, you had depth, and you had the leverage that comes with both. That scenario plays out at passive live tables constantly, and it is completely unavailable to you when you're sitting short stacked. Before we go on, if you're getting value from this video, give it a like and share it with someone else who's also serious about becoming a crusher just like you. Your support helps this channel grow, and it means the world to me. Share your questions and comments below as I read every comment, and they encourage me to create more content like this that will help level up your game exponentially. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future episodes. But I digress. The concept that ties all of this together is SPR, or stack to pot ratio, and most live players have never heard of the term despite the fact that it is quietly governing every post-flop decision they make. The math is simple. Effective stack divided by pot size on the flop. If the pot is $60 on the flop and the effective stack is $300, your SPR is 5. That number tells you how much room the hand has to develop and how committed one pair hands should actually be. When SPR is low, around 1 to 3, Overpairs and top pair become stack-off hands far more often. You 3-bet, villain calls, the pot is around $90, and the effective stack is $200, giving you an SPR of just under 3. In most heads-up situations at that depth, pocket aces, pocket kings, top pair, top kicker, on a dry board put you in a position where the ranges, equities, and stack depth all point towards continuing. When SPR sits around the medium range of 4 to 6, decisions get considerably harder. Board texture matters, villain tendencies matter, and turn and river cards matter. This is where many live players bleed chips, treating medium SPR pots like low SPR pots and stacking off in pots where they have no clear equity advantage. When SPR reaches 7 or above, one pair hands shrink dramatically in value, and position becomes one of the most decisive factors alongside nut advantage and range asymmetry. This is where the best live players generate their edge, applying pressure to players who overcommit with top pair, top kicker in large pots and cannot find a fold. The example that illustrates this most clearly involves the famous and often heartbreaking pocket aces. You 3-bet, villain calls. The pot is $150, and the effective stack is $250, giving you an SPR of just under 2. In most heads-up situations, your range advantage, equity, and stack depth all align, and the stacking off becomes standard. Now consider the same pocket aces in a single raise pot at 250 big blinds deep, where SPR is a gigantic 12. A tight, solid player check raises the flop, leads the turn, and shoves the river. Stacking off in that spot is a potential disaster because that player is not showing up with thin air when he takes that line. Same hand, completely different depth, completely different decisions, and the players who treat both situations identically are the ones funding everyone else's great nights. The biggest leak I see across the board in live players is that they are card-focused instead of stack-focused. They look at their hands and react. A crusher approaches every hand differently, asking, what is the stack depth? What is the SPR? Whether they want to play for stacks at this depth, and whether the situation calls for implied odds or carries reverse implied odds risk. That gap in thinking is the difference between playing on feel and actually printing money at the table. The framework going forward is straightforward and easy. When you are short stack, play big cards, apply fold equity, protect your equity, and stop pursuing implied odds that do not exist at that depth. When you are at medium range depth, tighten up, apply pressure, and raise more than you call. At standard depth, implied odds are live. Your post-flop game opens up, and cap ranges become targets. Deep stack, you prioritize nut potential and position above everything else. And you exercise real discipline with one-paired hands in pots that are growing faster than your edge can justify. From now on, your table rule is one question before every hand. How deep are we? And what does this depth reward? That question, applied consistently on every single hand, will improve your win rate faster than almost anything else you can work on. If you want me to go through your actual hands and show you exactly where your stack depth decisions are costing you real money, come find me on WhatsApp. We'll go through real hands together. We'll find what is exactly and actually costing you money, and we will fix those leaks together step by step. The link is in the description below. Come find me and let's get crushing.